35 years ago, John Carpenter's They Live released to theaters, and will we be talking about that film today if it was about cannibal aliens from outer space instead of alien capitalists hiding within the elite, distracting society with consumerism? That is what studios had tried to convince John Carpenter of, but he held his ground and delivered a film that perfectly reflected society at the time in a decade defined by greed being good, which was perfectly summed up a year prior in the movie Wall Street. And while studios tried to sway him from his topic, Carpenter would also encounter a minor setback when They Live was set to release against one of his own creations, Michael Myers and Halloween 4, on October 21st of 1988. While having already released promotional materials with that date, They Live moved back to November 4th and opened at number 1 in the box office, despite critics' negative reviews lashing out at the social criticism, the script, and the acting. While the film had a moderate box office run, it has gone on to become a cult classic, featuring one of the greatest lines in the 80s and in cinematic history, a line Roddy Piper pulled from his wrestling playbook.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Here are 5 behind-the-scenes stories from the making of They Live that you may not have,
or probably,
heard of.
Number 5. John Carpenter bought the film rights of a story that inspired him to make They Live. 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson, published in 1963 in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. Then 1975's Tales of Terror from Outer Space, and later in a comic book in 1985, Alien Encounters. The story is 4 to 6 pages, depending on the formatting. George Nada wakes up to find that there is a great secret being kept from the world, and he's the only human to have found out the truth. He can now see the lizard-like alien creatures that have invaded Earth and have used hypnotism via subliminal messages to hide their true identity from humans in an Invasion of the Body Snatchers-like story. Today, issue number 6 of the comic series is available for less than $30 near mint. Number 4.
Despite being inspired by a short story in the comic book, if you were to ask John Carpenter if he made a sci-fi film, he will respond with that he made a documentary. See, having grown disgusted with how Ronald Reagan had transformed his traditional values that he had grown up with into Reaganomics and corporate greed, where consumerism ran rampant in our culture. Even to this day, Carpenter has not wavered from his stance and in fact has stated that They Live has become more real in today's current culture.
So, the 80s never ended. They're still here. They're still on Earth exploiting us.
We just need the glasses.
No, we do. We just more than ever.
Number 3. Originally, the role of Nada was written for Kurt Russell, but after coming off of 3 films together, Escape from New York, The Thing, and Big Trouble in Little China, John Carpenter decided to go in a different direction. Before finding Roddy Piper, Carpenter considered a bunch of different actors for the role. Just to name a few, those considered were Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford, Michael Keaton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, and Bruce Campbell.
Groovy.
At the time, Piper's biggest non-wrestling credit was playing a preacher in Sam J. Jones's one-season TV series, The Highwayman. Carpenter, who is a wrestling fan, was at WrestleMania 3 and met with Piper for dinner after the event. It was at that dinner that Carpenter knew he had found his lead. Carpenter would say this about Piper: "Unlike most Hollywood actors, Roddy has life written all over him. He has been hit so many times that he is really broken up. He even walks funny because his pelvis was shattered and his back was wrenched. He is definitely not a pretty boy. He's the toughest guy I've met. You run a truck into Roddy, and he would still be standing.
Do you think for 1 second on my way out, Hot Rod gonna be humiliated by someone who wears a dress look like someone shot the curtains at Dave's head? You're wrong! No retreat and no surrender!
Number 2.
Roddy Piper was the first wrestler to cross over into Hollywood in a leading role before Hulk Hogan. He felt that transitioning to Hollywood would be better for his long-term career, as he knew that wrestlers needed to have something after wrestling. So he began to eye up different roles. After landing the part of Nada, Vince McMahon did not want Piper to appear in They Live and promised to find him another Hollywood role with the same payday within 4 weeks. But Piper said,
"In WrestleMania 3 in the Silverdome, 93,000 people, John Carpenter asked me to do the movie They Live. And Vince McMahon Jr. got mad at me because he said, I'll have another movie for you in 4 weeks. I said, not with John Carpenter directing it.
Right.
So he sent a message via my lawyer that Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon are the only true blue WWFers.
This caused animosity for Piper in the wrestling world, and specifically with McMahon. Piper went on to make the film, which caused his relationship with Vince to fall apart and led him to leave the then WWF at the time where Vince told Piper that the WWF didn't need him, and Piper responded with that he didn't need the WWF. 2 years later, however, Piper returned to wrestling, but his career never was the same as it was prior to making They Live.
Number 1. Prior to filming, John Carpenter set out on the streets of America in search of filming locations that would reflect the rich and powerful exploiting the working poor and everyone else not a part of the elite spending class. And what he found, no art department could replicate. Derelicts, the forgotten, real people taking shelter themselves from the rain under broken umbrellas, cardboard crates, or plastic tarps. Their lives and worldly belongings amassed in paper sacks or garbage bags. The homeless. Nada was a drifter who would find work from town to town with everything he owned being strapped to his back. He lived in a homeless camp, and the one depicted in the film is the real deal. Not a set, and the homeless people on screen were not hired extras. Those were real homeless people that Carpenter would pay. The homeless camp was located on North Boylston Street and West Court Street in Los Angeles, California. The key word is was, as the homeless were eventually chased away and their home was replaced with a baseball field.
Do you agree with our list, or do you have a suggestion for something that we should cover in a future list? Let us know by dropping that in the comments. And don't forget,
Like, comment, share, and subscribe.
thank you as always. We appreciate you for watching, and until the next.
See ya.